Hello, welcome to This Week in Politics. Today we're going to take a look at the last week in U.S. politics. And it's been a big week. We started the week with the solar eclipse, and we ended the week with a Trump rally in Arizona. The solar eclipse was awesome, by the way. I did not live in the area of totality, but we were pretty dark here for, I don't know, about a minute. Kind of cool. Once in a lifetime event. Well, twice if I live another 20 years. But the first big issue I wanted to talk about today was Afghanistan. Now, in the beginning of the week, Donald Trump gave a major speech on Afghanistan. And there was some issues that I had. Number one, he did a flip-flop. While he was campaigning, he said that he wanted to do a complete pullout of Afghanistan, which I thought was, well, I'm really kind of torn on that issue. I'm not really sure. I don't think I wanted a full withdrawal, but I did want some policies changed, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. But there were some immediate questions I had. Number one, he did a flip-flop, which is one of the probably 2 or 3 flip-flops he's done since Bannon left. But he goes on national TV for the first time since his presidency, as far as I can tell, and does a complete flip-flop and says he's going to now increase troops and we're going to kill terrorists, which is a good thing. But why the flip-flop? It is amazing to me that Trump, who has picked his own cabinet, put his own people around him, he now has no Republicans around him with the exit of Bannon. Machine Gun Kelly, he's a Democrat. McMaster's, he's a Democrat. McMaster's is so much a Democrat that he has gone through his department and has systematically removed anybody that is espousing or supports in any way, shape, or form any of Donald Trump's initiatives. That's worrying. And why Trump was allowing that to happen is beyond me. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Afghanistan policy was made 2 or 3 days after Bannon is fired or resigned, however you want to look at it. Secondly, a second concern that I had is, what's the goal? I mean, it's a good goal to say we're going to kill terrorists. That's okay. But how will we know when we win? I mean, will we know that we won when ISIS raises up a white flag and says we surrender? I mean, I don't see that happening. So I mean, at some point we're either going to do this indefinitely, or there's going to be an exit strategy, whatever that point is, and I don't know because I don't believe the goal was stated. Thirdly, I have many issues with this, so I'm not even going to count them anymore. But another issue is Pakistan is a problem. Number one, that's an Islamic state. Remember, that's where we went in and got Osama bin Laden. And Pakistan has nukes. They are a nuclear power. Now, every administration for as far back as I can remember, since Reagan at least, has pacified Pakistan. We currently give them $3 billion a year in aid. That is a major percentage, 90% of their total budget is from US aid. So we should carry a pretty big stick in Pakistan. There is currently a man running for the presidency in Pakistan that is anti-American and says that we that Pakistan should distance themselves from the United States. I'm fine with that, but I want my $3 billion back, and I'm going to put troops on your border. And the first time you step out of line, I'm going to squish you like a bug. And if that's how you want to be treated, that's fine. But if that's not how you want to be treated, you need to stop being such a pain when it comes to fighting terrorists. You're harboring them, you're giving them safe sanctuary, and you're right next door to a country where Americans have been fighting and dying now for 16 years. So in Trump's Afghanistan policy, one of the disappointments I had was he is not dealing with the Pakistani problem, which is a problem in that area. I mean, it doesn't do any good to get, I mean, even if it were possible to get rid of every single terrorist in Afghanistan, it does us no good at all if as soon as we kill the last one, another 1,000 cross the border from Pakistan. Now we have to start all over, and that's what they're doing. They're wearing us out through attrition. That issue needs to be solved before we're going to solve the problem in Afghanistan. Now, another issue that I have, I said earlier that McMaster's is a Democrat, and that is true. He is also a globalist. He is also pro-war around the planet. He wants a war in Afghanistan. He wants a war in Syria. And again, Bannon leaves, and 3 days later, Trump makes a national thing, and McMaster's is consolidating his power and getting rid of Trump supporters. That is very, very troubling to me. And it bothers me that Trump is not addressing any of this as a national problem. When Bannon was in there, every day there was an article in the paper or something on the radio about discord in the White House. Well, now Trump is surrounded by Democrats. They're controlling his information flow. They're helping to set policy in there. And he's done 3 flip-flops as far as I can tell, and Afghanistan is one of them. So, in my opinion, at some point, McMaster's is going to have to go. And he's done a lot of damage already, and he's only been there a couple of weeks. Now, as I said, in Afghanistan, they don't want us to go. I mean, they are a Islamic country, but they do not want us to go. And it's not because they want us to kill terrorists. They could care less about that. They've been living with that for a long time. The reason they don't want us to go is because with our forces there, we supply 95% of their budget, which is quite a bit when you consider the fact that they pretty much own the world's trade on poppy fields. They supply most of the world with heroin. And yet, no matter how much of that they do, we still supply 95% of their budget. So they want us to stay there, but they only want us there because of the money. They don't want us there because they want to kill terrorists. Now, here's one of the major deals that the press is not telling you about the Afghanistan issue. I did a program a couple of years ago, and I was so livid about this, and this has never been changed. But Obama kept the troops in Afghanistan because he learned his lesson from Iraq. But he gave the U.S. military forces this order: you are not to hunt down terrorists. You are not to kill bad guys. Your force is to be used only in defense of your life. That is the dumbest order I've ever heard. Why in the world? Why would you do that? Why would you send all of those people to a foreign country and then have them sit on their thumbs? So nothing has happened, and very few have died, but the terrorists are multiplying like flies over there. All Trump really had to do was lift that order and say, go get them. But instead, He mentions nothing about lifting that order, and he's going to send more troops over. Now, since they have a new general in charge over there, I'm assuming that order has been lifted, but I've not seen or heard any word about that. All they have to do is lift that order, and the American fighting machine will go hunt down the bad guys. That's what they do. But I was absolutely upset when Obama did that, sending our guys over there in harm's way and then saying you can't go hunt down bad guys. That made no sense at all to me. Another issue that he said was there was no timeline. Now, I think that's a good thing, and I think that's a bad thing. It's a good thing in that the enemies, the terrorists, cannot play the same game that they've been playing with us. The game they've been playing is let's outweight the United States. We'll just dodge and bob and weave and hide, and they'll eventually get tired. And every once in a while, we'll kill one of their people, and the American people will get sick of it, and they'll pull the troops. And that's the game they've been playing. So Trump goes in and says, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're here until the job's done, however long that takes. A week, a month, a year, a decade, a century, whatever it takes. And I think that's good. But it's bad because, again, this shows the influence of the anti-Bannon crowd. You know, they want a war. They want U.S. troops engaged around the planet. Now, as a conservative, I am not opposed to that, but I do have one order that I would like to have done. And that is, if we're going to fight, then let's fight to win. Which leads me to my next issue. How do we know when we win? I mean, how are you going to measure that? When we reach a certain number of deaths? When terrorist attacks stop happening around the world? When we can't find any more to hunt? When we hit the 20-year mark? I mean, there has to be a tangible way to measure winning. In old wars, it was when one surrendered or the other one pummeled them just to death. You know, when we dropped the bomb in Japan, they surrendered. Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. That's how wars were won. We pummeled Germany to death until Hitler killed himself, and we just physically went in and took it over. But those are conventional wars. With this war against terrorism, how do you measure victory? Now, the liberal press has been talking about keeping troops in countries for 16 years, or however long it's going to be, and they seem to think that's an issue. I did a show a while back, right after Russia went into the Ukraine, and I said at that time, the way to hem in Russia without them being expansionist is for the United States to go to every border country with Russia and make them the following offer. We will protect you from Russia. Nobody's going to come in here and hurt you. In exchange, we want a permanent military base here, and we will man it, and we will do as we please when we please. And if that's acceptable, we'll protect you. If not, you're on your own. And don't call us for help when they come across the border. This permanent presence in Afghanistan is right up that alley, and I agree with that. I don't think this needs to be an in and out kind of thing, just like it should have been in Iraq. And if we go back into Iraq permanently, we better put up a military base, because when you are the big dog on the block, people are not going to pick a fight with you if they know they're going to get squashed like a bug. Russia's not going to go back into Afghanistan if we have a permanent military base there. And the more bases we have around borderline countries, the less chance there is of Russia uh, crossing the border to take more ground. I said at the time in Afghanistan, we have done nothing to help those people. Now we're going to see in an article later, again, in that same program, what I said was the big stick that Russia holds over the European Union is natural gas. And I said at the time, the United States needs to find a way to replace Russia's gas, even if we have to subsidize it, even if we have to give it away, just to take the hammer out of Russia's hand. We can bankrupt them in a year. They will have no cash. And all we have to do is give them some natural gas to supply the EU. And they're in the process of doing that. But when you take the hammer away from the second biggest dog, they are completely impotent. They have nothing they can offer any of those people over there. Right now, they're conquering because they control the natural gas. So the whole issue with Afghanistan is troubling to me for all of those reasons and others. But I feel like, and I still haven't come down on the side of, of what I think the policy should be. I think for right here and for right now, I think we need to stop looking at this as a temporary war and start looking at this as a permanent military base in Afghanistan, just like they do with all the other bases around the world with the 2-year tour. And everybody in the military does their 2 years there. And if they want to re-up, that's fine. But just like they do around the world, I mean, we have military bases in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, Guam, and all of these places where we have permanent military bases surround North Korea and China. And we did that to keep them from going in there. And that policy has worked for 70 years. Why are we not doing that with Russia? Makes no sense to me. But I think if we change our viewpoint and stop looking at it as a war where we need to get out, we look at this as a strategic military base where we're going to be there permanently, just like all those other bases. And I think that's the way we as Americans need to look at it. I think that's the way that the administration needs to look at it. And it is definitely the way it needs to be funded and supplied. Now, the second issue that happened this week was another one of our Navy boats got hit by another boat and put a big hole in the side of the boat. Water got in. Now, of course, with these new boats, all they needed to do was cordon off the areas underneath the boat, and the boat was fine. But they did have to take it to the dock, and 10 people are missing, assumed dead, because of this. Now, and the name of the boat was the USS John McCain, which, well, that was going to be a bad attempt at humor, so I'm going to pass. But I want you to think about this. There are so many, and I've been on a military boat, and I can assure you there is no possible way that should happen. They have so many checks and balances and sonar equipment and just every piece of equipment on there to detect even submarines, boats, ships. There is no possible way that should happen, and it's happened twice in the last month. And here's an interesting thing. Nobody's made this connection yet, but last month there was 2 Marine jets that were wrecked, and I think one of them had a couple of pilots killed. Do you know what the odds are of having 2 separate jets crashed singly and 2 Navy boats be hit by other boats And all of that happening within a 2-month period, that is almost the odds against that are astronomically high. Now, what are the possibilities? It's possible that the entire crew fell asleep at the wheel and nobody was paying attention. That could have happened, or they could have all been drugged. That could have happened. Or the exact same equipment on both ships was faulty. That could have happened, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. It could have been a stealth submarine. That would explain the boats, but it would not explain the planes unless there was a stealth plane, but they should have caught that on radar. I have done a lot of, my dad was in the military, in the Air Force, and so we knew some people in the Navy, and I've given this a lot of thought, and I've done a little research, and I believe that one of our enemies, and there's only 2 of them that have the wherewithal to do what I'm about to describe, and that would be Russia and China. But I believe one of our enemies is making a point to our military. And that point is we have the equipment to jam all of your defenses, and we can strike you at will. We've taken 2 of your advanced Marine fighters, and we've taken 2 of your naval fleet. And you didn't see us coming, and we can do this at will. Now, how do they do that? One of the scenarios that I have seen is with there's a microwave type of weapon that they can fire at their target. Now, how would they apply that? I don't know. It could have been a lot of ways. It could have been like when the boat hit our Navy boat. It could have been on that boat. It could have been from a submarine underneath the water. It could have been done by a satellite from the air with like a radar on it with microwaves going through. But however they were able to do that, I think, and I don't pretend to know the science of it, but I do know this. There is something odd going on. 2 naval planes, 2 Marine planes, 2 naval ships in 2 months. The odds of that are astronomical. And so I'm 99% sure there is something going on, and we may not ever know what it is. But I know one thing. I know that's not a coincidence. A coincidence would be 1 plane last year and 1 boat this year. That would be a coincidence. But 2 boats in 1 month, and then the month before 2 planes, all 4 of them with no explanation. There's something going on. I believe one of our powers, they're not attacking us, but they're sending a message that says, if you don't let up, if you don't back off, we're going to keep taking until we take your entire fleet out. Now, how our military reacts to that, I don't know. I don't have a clue. I don't even know that they've put 2 and 2 together. I do know that the Navy has pulled all of their ships and have them all inspected and gone over. And I know that they fired the admiral on one of the boats, this last one on the USS John McCain. I'm pretty sure they fired him. But logic tells me that it's not his fault. They're using a scapegoat to make it look like his fault. But like I said, there are so many checks and balances and so many monitoring tools. I mean, these boats were made for war. Nobody is going to sneak up on a naval ship. So that was the second issue that happened. Now the third one was kind of a fun event. It was a rally in Arizona. Donald Trump went to Arizona to hold one of his typical rallies, and he picked Arizona for a specific reason, because that is the state that John McCain is from, and that's the state that Jeffrey Flake is from. And both of these guys have voted against Trump's initiatives. Both of them claim to be Republican. And Trump went there to rally support and to get rid of these two. And he stuck with McCain for 5 more years, if he lives that long, which I doubt. But Flake is up for election in 2018, and he wants Flake out of there. So he is going there to tell everybody, hey, let's pick a Tea Party guy to run against Jeffrey Flake, and I support that 100%. This guy's a flake. He is a rhino, a liberal rhino at that. Now, there was some things in Trump's rally that I thought were awesome. With the budget fight coming up, and I said this when Trump came into office, he only needs to do a couple of things to be reelected. Everything else can be a flop, but there's a couple of things that have to happen. And one of them is he has to build the wall. That has to happen. If he comes up for election in 3.5 years and that wall isn't being built or in the process of being built, he's not going to be reelected. So the budget battle that is coming up, they have put money in there, not the entire part of it. And the Democrats, of course, and some liberal Republicans, including Flake and McCain, are going to vote against this budget because of the money in there for the wall. In which case, if that happens, Trump, in this speech, threatened to shut the government down until the budget is passed. And I support that. Every time we go through this, I always see the rule is this. When the government shuts down like this, they mean all non-necessary government offices. Okay? And I ask this question every time, and I'm going to, again, when this government shuts down, I'm going to ask, if it is a non-necessary office, why do we have it? As a conservative Republican, I want smaller government. I only want what is absolutely positively necessary. If it's not necessary, get rid of it. So if it shuts down, when the government shuts down, let's shut it down permanently. Let's give them all pink slips and have them all go try to find real jobs where they really have to work. And that'll do 2 things. Number one, it'll drastically lessen the money that we are spending. And secondly, it'll get rid of a vast majority of bureaucrats in the deep state, because that's where they are. That's where the bureaucrats are. So I would love it. Shut the government down, and then once we find out exactly which buildings shut down, then go through and start passing out pink slips. And if you have to shut down and shutter the whole building, do that. And if you have to do that across the country, do that. But the press is going to make it seem like our national security is going to be at hand. I can see the writing on the wall already. This is how the press is going to handle it. They're going to say this is a crisis, this is un-American, this is not in our national interest, we are at risk. I mean, everything. But the truth of the matter is, everything that is necessary, that needs to stay open, all of the military offices, all of the FBI and the CIA and those things all stay open. The things that are not necessary are office buildings, like the Office of Personnel or the EPA or the Department of Education. These are non-necessary offices, and I question all the time, if they're not necessary, why do we have them? Get rid of them. But he made that in his speech in Arizona. He said that we'll shut the government down until we get the wall. I think that's great. Another thing he was talking about was Sheriff Joe Arpaio from Arizona. Now, he was a sheriff down there, and he recently lost election down there. And then after they got him out of office, they took him to court. They found him guilty of, I think that actually they got him for, the original charge was profiling. Now, I want you to picture this in your mind. He's a sheriff in a county in Arizona, and he was caught for profiling Mexicans crossing the border. That's his job. His job is to get illegals and ship them back. What are you going to do? Pull over Chinese? Pull over white guys? I mean, if they're coming from Mexico, chances are they're going to look Mexican. So yeah, he probably was profiling, and yeah, he probably does need to profile them. I mean, that's kind of the whole issue. And that's one of the things the press is doing, not only from Mexico, but from the Middle East. They're saying that we are profiling them coming from the Middle East. Okay, if your job is to keep terrorists out of this country, what guidelines are you going to use? Well, first you're going to find out from where are these terrorists coming from. And when you go down the list of countries terrorists are coming from, they're all from the Middle East. So if it's your job to keep terrorists out, you're going to need to keep people out that are from the Middle East. I mean, doesn't that make sense? If terrorists are coming from the Middle East, you're not going to keep Russians out. I mean, why would you look at Russians? Russians aren't terrorists in this country. It's Middle Eastern. And illegal immigrants are not from Russia. They're coming across our southern border. They are Mexicans or South Americans. So if it's my job to go out and get these guys and put them back across the border, guess who I'm going to pull over? Every Mexican or South American that I see, I'm going to pull over and ask for them to prove to me that they are legal. And if they're not, they're going to be arrested and sent back. That's the way you roll with, if that's your job. So anyway, he got railroaded because he made some enemies, and they found him guilty. And in this speech that Trump gave, he said, "My handlers told me that I should not issue a pardon in this type of an atmosphere of a rally. I should do this quietly." He said, "So I'm not going to say anything except this: Sheriff Joe's going to be okay." So naturally, 3 or 4 days later, I think it was Friday. He did issue a pardon, and Sheriff Joe did get his pardon from the president, and I think that was awesome. That's the way it should be. That was strictly a political thing. Another thing he talked about, and I agree with this 100%. He needs to get rid of the filibuster rule in the Senate. Now, when the Democrats were in office, they had no problem at all. They got rid of that thing in a heartbeat. But Mitch McConnell is trying to take the holier than thou road, which Republicans always do, and they always get the snot beat out of them. And the Democrats always yell and scream when we threaten to do it. But as soon as they're in power, everybody in the whole world says, "Oh yeah, that sounds fair. Let's do that. Let's end cloture." If you have 100 people, to get 51 to agree to anything is good. To get 60 people to agree to anything is damn near impossible. Now, the Democrats did that routinely with their judicial nominees. Mitch McConnell will not do that. Mitch McConnell is part of the swamp. He's a swamp rat. He is a Republican in name only. And I tell you the truth, I hope the next rally that Trump holds, I hope is in the state of Kentucky. I don't know when Mitch McConnell's election comes up, but we need to go after him. He is purposely standing in the way. He had 7 years to deliver the vote on repealing Obamacare. And when it mattered, he dropped the ball. Trump has submitted a list of judicial nominees, and to my knowledge, not one of them has been passed yet. And Mitch McConnell has dropped the ball. He's not getting them through. At this point in the Obama administration, Obama had 400 plus of his nominees confirmed through the Senate. Trump has 40. Let that sink in for a minute. Trump has 40 because the Democrats are slowing things down through the filibuster. We need to stop that. Mitch McConnell has dropped the ball. Every opportunity he has had, he has screwed Trump. Now, I'm not totally on board with Trump, but I don't like to see somebody that's supposed to be on your side doing this. This is not how you do things. Isn't 8 years of being kicked by the Democrats, isn't that enough? The American people gave you guys the House, the Senate, the presidency, and 35 governorships. You damn well better do something with it. Let's get up and start kicking them back. We need to end cloture, make it a 51 vote, and let's get these 360 nominees through. Let's start getting some judges approved, and let's start stacking the courts with young conservative judges. Mitch has dropped the ball. He is purposely, when it first happened, I thought, well, he's got he's like trying to herd rabbits. I get it. But when I look back over, it's been 7 months. Every issue that Mitch McConnell has the ability to have an influence, he has done the anti-Trump thing, the anti-conservative thing. He's done the swamp thing. He's got to go. He's got to go. And I don't care if we have to, if we have to get rid of him like we did the House leader from Ohio last time before we got Ryan. And Ryan's a swamp rat too, frankly. But at least Ryan is getting some bills through the House. Mitch isn't getting anything done, except halting, he's doing what the swamp wants to do, wants to halt any progress of Trump. The Democrats definitely do not want Trump to succeed, and the swamp does not want Trump to succeed. So everybody's ganging up on Trump. The only true supporters that Trump has is the Tea Party. And I'm going to say this every opportunity I get for the next 2 years. Whatever state you're in, we took the presidency because there's a lot of states that are conservative. There's only a few states that are liberal, but those few states have a lot of votes. But the Senate, every state has 2 senators. If your state has a Republican that is not a Tea Party, the Tea Party needs to run a conservative Republican against them in the primary. And then the Tea Party needs to dump some money behind each one of those where they have an opportunity. Arizona is one where Flake is at. They've got a lady lined up to run, and she just about beat him last time, but with help from the Tea Party and Trump coming in there, that is definitely one we can take. And we're only going to need 3 or 4 nationwide this time to have firm control. And at that point, then we can form a block and get rid of Mitch McConnell. But first things first, we need to run Tea Party candidates in the primaries against these rhinos. Now, the last thing that I noticed, he does a version of this every time. But this time he was very specific. Now, there was an issue last week that we talked about Charlottesville. And the press and the liberals were all harassing him about how he answered. And he came out and made 3 different addresses to try to pacify the press, which of course will never happen with Trump. So this time in his rally, what he did is he brought out a written manuscript from each press conference that he had, and he read everything that he said and every response that he had gotten from that address. And when he was done, the press looked like a bunch of lying, hypocritical fools, which is exactly what they are. But it was great because Trump held their feet to the fire. And now his rally went longer than normal, but it was because he probably spent 20 minutes on this issue alone, addressing Charlottesville, so he could tell the American people, I am not biased one way or the other. Here's what I said, and here's what the press said I said. I have the written tapes here, and you can look on YouTube and see what was said. Do not listen to the lying, cheating press. And I thought that was great. He did a great job with that. The press, or the rally, was a huge success, and I was glad to see that. Now, at the end of whenever I go through this, the last thing I like to do is go through some articles that I had found in the paper this week, and just make a little comment, whether it's little or big, but just to kind of, so we can chronicle the events that happened this week. So, you know, if I do this show for 10 years, in 10 years we can go back and pick a date, and we'll know what the headlines were and what the major issues were and who the players were. And that's kind of the issue. So that this will be, the issues covered here will be relative today and for history. And that's, I think that's more important because, okay, I'm going to do a little side thing here. One of the things that I am an avid reader. I love history, and I love biographies. One of the things that I have noticed, I'm getting old enough now to where I've lived some history, and I remember history. And liberals are the ones that rewrite history. What that means is they lie to put forth their point of view. And that has always bothered me. Now, there's nothing I can do. I'm not a writer. I'm not a historian. And I'm not smart enough to know how to take the facts and lie. I'm just not smart enough to do that. But what I can do is I can do this type of a program. The issues that we talked about today were the three major issues that happened in this country and politics this week. That's why the title of our programs will always be the date and the year. And then to further show the history and how it actually happened, we're going to take it out of the newspapers or out of magazines. And we're going to address it and tell it to the best of my ability, to the way that it truly happened. So that way, in 5 years or 4 years, when Trump goes to run for the presidency and the press looks back on this week and talks about the Afghanistan policy, they won't be able to lie and cheat and manipulate the facts. They can come back to a place where it is chronicled right up front. So anyway, that's one of the impetuses for the format of this program. So one of the ads that we found was called "Trump Ups Ante in Afghan Fight." We pretty much addressed this when we were talking about the Afghan policy. And in this article, they talk about upping the troops to 4,000. I never saw that in his speech anywhere. I never heard that number. I think they said it was internal, something that his Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, let's see, Mr. Trump has agreed to a strategy that will allow his Defense Secretary, Jim Mattis, to send as many as 4,000 additional troops to reinforce U.S. counterterrorism efforts against the Taliban and the Islamic State extremist group. How do they know that? I never heard that. That was a press. That was something the press made up. I listened to the speech. It never said that. Now, a while back, when I say a while back, I mean it was before, it was just after Obama's second election. And the whole IRS scandal with Lois Lerner in Ohio. Now, I knew at the time, at the day of the election, I knew that there was voter fraud in at least 2 counties in southern Ohio around Cincinnati. And I knew that because the number of votes exceeded the number of registered voters. And you could see that very plainly. And come to find out, the IRS office there was led by a woman by the name of Lois Lerner, and they've been back and forth. She's Democrat, of course, and they had back and forth. They had lots of evidence on her, and she has never been punished. Nothing has ever been resolved. Nothing has ever been done. She retired. They gave her full benefits, and we know for a fact that she was targeting certain groups and not giving them the 501c3 certification in an effort to influence the election. And this article, the title of it is called Still Seeking IRS Accountability. The opening paragraph says the Obama Justice Department dismissed the IRS political targeting scandal as no big deal, and the Trump administration hasn't been any better. At least the judiciary is still trying to hold someone to account for this government abuse. In a little notice decision last week, the federal judge, Reggie Walton, ordered the IRS to answer a series of questions by October 16th. Notably, the tax agency must finally explain the specific reasons for the specific delays in approving each of dozens of conservative nonprofit applications. See, it's not a question of if it was done. We know for a fact that it was done. And I said at the time when I did those programs, the only person that has the authority to stop an investigation like that and let everything smooth over was Obama. In the midst of this whole thing, we found out that there was a lot of emails going not just from the IRS, but they went to the FBI, the CIA, and the White House. Now, why would a little head of an office in Cincinnati, Ohio, be emailing the White House? When you think about the implications of that, this is a huge deal. And I hope that somebody gets on this. Heads should roll over this. And that Lois Lerner was allowed to retire with full benefits, and that's wrong. Now, let me read you the ending paragraph here. It says, the Trump administration also has a duty to provide some answers. The Justice Department and IRS have continued to resist the lawsuits as doggedly as they did in the Obama era. And you know why? Because that is the swamp. That is the deep state. That's the bureaucrats. Attorney General Jeff Sessions can change that by ordering government attorneys to quickly and fully comply with Judge Walton's order. 7 years is too long to wait for answers over abuses of government's taxing power. And that's not going to happen, and here's why. Jeff Sessions, although appointed by Donald Trump, is also a swamp rat. He's part of the problem. He is a swamp rat, and that is not going to happen. It took a judge outside of Washington to order that to happen. So he orders it, and now the Justice Department under Jeff Sessions is going to respond, but he won't. He will stall, delay, excuses. That's what's going to happen. You watch. When October 16th comes, if I can remember, we'll check up on that and see what happens. And I promise you what's going to happen is that it's going to stall. I said earlier in the program about the way, and I said in a program years ago, that the way to get rid of Russia is for the U.S. to find a way to replace the natural gas that Russia provides to the EU. And this article says, also taking out of the paper this week, U.S. Russia duel over gas exports to Europe. U.S. attempts to export natural gas into Europe's energy market are facing stiff resistance from the region's dominant competitor, Russia. Well, of course it is. As soon as we take that hammer out of Russia's hand, they're done. First off, they won't have any power to hold over the EU. And secondly, their source of income is either going to be drastically reduced or eliminated. That's one of the problems with a socialist country. They always run out of everybody else's money. All we got to do is get into their pocketbook and they will run out. They will be inept. And their number one source of income is natural gas. Now it says at the end of the article, many analysts still expect the nascent U.S. exports to eat into Russia's share of the European market, which is about 1/3. I do too. The U.S. shale revolution has unlocked vast energy reserves, and the country is expected to become a great natural gas exporter. Absolutely. And so we should. Russia is using that as a power grab, using natural gas, and they're going into countries, dominating them and threatening them. We're going to take over and you're not going to fight us, or we're going to cut off your natural gas, your people will freeze. And they're using force to come across to kill people. Governments that do that, all they understand is power. Okay? We now have the power because of fracking. We got enough natural gas to support us and the EU for centuries. There's no reason in the world why we should allow Russia to have that foothold over there. We need to get all the natural gas we can and just flood the market over there. It's not about making money. It's about getting rid of Russia. Now, the last thing I want to talk about from the newspaper article, I did a show not too long ago on the Right Wing Reverend where I was talking about trying to educate the young people about socialism, because the majority of young people in the last presidential election were Bernie-crats. And in the article that we were talking about, half of them are against capitalism, and a full 1/3 are pro-socialism. And I couldn't understand why. And I have an idea why, because they don't know what socialism looks like. So I tried to draw a couple of parallels, and one of the things I told them was the press is not going to report on Venezuela because Maduro down there is a socialist who took over for Chavez, who was a socialist, and Venezuela is in turmoil right now. And this happens in every socialist country. They eventually run out of money and they end up, now the only socialist country that has lasted is Cuba, but Cuba is dirt poor, except for the leaders of the country. Everybody in that country is dirt poor, and they rely on the benevolence of other socialist entities, a couple in Africa, one or two in South America, and specifically Russia. Otherwise, they would have nothing. Their people would be dead. And Venezuela is going through the same thing. They have reneged on international promises. Their people are starving. There's no food in the markets. They nationalized the oil companies, and right after they did that, the oil prices plummeted. And so now they have no money with all the things that socialists do. So this ad that, or this story that I pulled, there was a female prosecutor down in Venezuela that started investigating the leaders of the country, because in a socialist country, all of the leaders are corrupt. That's how they make their millions and billions of dollars. Putin is a criminal. That's been proven. And all of his people, they call them oligarchs. What they really are is thieves. And it's the same in Venezuela, and it's the same in Cuba, and it's the same in every socialist country. there was a prosecutor down there, a female called Luisa Ortega, who has proof of the corruption down there by Maduro. So Maduro got the House to fire her. And there's a warrant out now for her arrest, and she's not allowed to leave the country. So she is continuing her investigation on the run and in hiding. That means if the US was smart, they would find a way to get her some protection and get her some help down there to do the investigation, and then get her out of the country and try them not in the Venezuelan courts, because dictators always win there, but in the to go to The Hague. Now, she says that she has, and I think this is the paragraph, her probes, though certain to be ignored at home, could lead to more sanctions and greater financial isolation for Mr. Maduro's government, according to lawyers and the human rights activists. Well, that's true. And she says, if I could go through international channels, I'll go to the international organizations. I don't discard turning to The Hague because I got a body of evidence that allows me to do so, she said, referring to the International Criminal Court based in the Dutch city. That's awesome. Unfortunately, if we do not step in there and help her, the news stories in the very near future is going to be of her demise or arrest and then death. So, but that's mostly the three main issues that we had, and the 3 or 4 articles that I pulled out to chronicle for this week. And as I said, the purpose of this program is always, and every week and every story, is to chronicle what has happened on this day and this week in politics.